Welcome to Breaking the Standard, where we are closing the communication and knowledge gap for the small business government contracting industry. I'm Aubrey Gainford, and today we have very special guest Jerry Miles with us. Jerry, welcome.
You, certainly. I would go ahead and just introduce myself. I am a government contracts corporate and employment lawyer. I am the managing principal of Deal Services. We are a high quality, reasonably priced government contracts law firm. We help companies win bids, disputes, and lawsuits across three areas, from government contracting to corporate law to employment law. And really, our goal is to provide value to clients by being a teammate, not a tax when it comes to fees. We've been in business since 2011. And so, that's a little background about Deal Services. We also are a sponsor and heavily involved in an impending 501c3 nonprofit trade association called GovSeries. And to find out more information about this fledgling impending trade association GovSeries and some of our upcoming events, please do consider following GovSeries on LinkedIn and stay tuned for more.
Yeah, I will link Jerry's LinkedIn profile as well as the GovSeries info in the show notes. So you can go check them out. It looks like they're getting ready to build a really interesting networking group that you can meet other, professionals in this industry. And honestly, I think a lot happens out of networking. You get to meet people that maybe you would have never met before, and it creates a ton of opportunities. So I will definitely share all of that information. Today, we're going to be talking about joint ventures and the benefits that they offer. So, first and foremost, can you briefly explain what joint ventures are and how do they work in terms of like contracting?
Okay, well, certainly. I think FAR Part 9.6 actually like sort of sets this forth when they're talking about contractor teaming arrangements, and a joint venture will actually fall within that category. We're not talking CTAs like GSA schedule CTAs, but the FAR sort of incorporates at that section a broader concept of all sorts of teaming relationships. The value proposition being that you can win more with more. And that's exactly what I've been instructing clients and through Apex now, like Apex Accelerator programming and relative similar programming, folks for years, is that joint ventures essentially help you win more with more. If the question is, what is a joint venture? A joint venture on the contractual spectrum is going to be the most high risk based teaming relationship, in my opinion. All right. So if an NDA is that you met at a networking event, right? If a prime and subcontract relationship is that you are dating, then a joint venture is essentially going to be a marriage with children. Years ago, when I was involved in the AFCEA Bethesda Small Business Committee, I was charged with inviting an Oasis program manager out to for Oasis One out to talk up to the community about joint ventures, and he was very poignant in stating that agencies generally do not like fly by night joint ventures. In other words, if a joint venture is a marriage with children, then we're not looking for two folks to have met at the networking event, and then the next day they're jumping in and promising the agency solutions with the marriage with children. Just like any marriage with children, if one side is not happy, it can lead to a breakdown of not only the joint venture performance on the contract, but also a breakdown of the respective companies that are doing the work of the joint venture as tacit subcontractors, and their past and ultimately impact the joint venture's past performance, but also maybe their perception against within the agency. Semantically, a joint venture is going to involve a 51-49% equity split. We're not looking at a joint venture being sort of a value item from an equity standpoint. Generally, joint ventures are formed for a contract by contract pursuit. So while in the commercial world, we're looking at joint ventures as being this sort of standing entity that exists for the purposes of pursuing more multiple different business activities authorized under state law. Although a joint venture generally exists within the eyes of SBA it has like a 2-year life cycle. However, it can receive an unlimited number of awards within a 2-year pursuit period, right? Whereas previously it was only three awards in 2 years. It's now an unlimited amount of awards for 2 years. And then all of those awards that joint venture can continue performing. When it comes to that 51-49 equity split, that's really an underscoring the proposition that JVs, when it comes to equity, need to be controlled by the small business majority partner. Okay. And what are we doing when we're having a child? We're creating small businesses. We're creating 8A small businesses. We're creating woman-owned small businesses. We're creating hub zone small businesses, regardless of whether there's a small business on the other side, so long as if it's not a small business, you're engaged in a mentor-protege relationship. Very importantly, and likely near lastly, in a joint venture, if it is an 8A joint venture, for example, there's going to the sort of equity does not tie to profit. So where does profit come from? Profit in a joint venture, in an 8A joint venture, using that as a hypothetical example, is going to the 8A, who's lended its status to that JV to make that an 8A small business joint venture, has to do 40% of the work, and their work must be commensurate with their profit share must be commensurate with the work performed. Unlike the limitations on subcontracting rules under the Federal Acquisition Regulation and the SBA regulations, although they apply to joint ventures, what we're talking about here is that on the minority side, depending on the accumulation of partners, that leaves up to 60% of the work and 60% of the profit going to partners of that joint venture. We can discuss in a few moments, I'm sure, the reasons why that might be beneficial, whereas, about 50 under the limitations on subcontracting. So if you weren't to do a JV and you're only to prime sub, we get about 50% of the gross amount paid by the government can go to the subcontract. I mean, it must go to the prime contractor. JVs, 60% of the profit and work can go to partners. Okay, so there's somewhat of a restriction. Last sort of semantic thing is that we're going to realize that JVs come in two forms, but very importantly, populated or unpopulated. We'll probably talk about that in a moment. Populated means it has people in it. The SBA no longer allows that other than for similarly situated entities, probably beyond the scope of a short discussion here. But unpopulated joint ventures are shells. So how does this JV do work? The JV will do work. This is getting for by, essentially the parents drop down and stroll that shell JV, like any child in a stroller, by doing the work as implied or tacit subcontractors of the JV. All right.
You said a lot.
I'm a lawyer. Can you tell I get paid to talk?
I know. Yeah. Also, some of that is really interesting because I actually haven't encountered a lot of joint ventures in my day job. Okay. But does it work the same with JVs like it does with the prime subs, where primes and subs now can use their experience for past performance submissions? Can the same thing happen in JVs?
That's been the historical standout benefit of joint ventures. Okay. Right? The historical standout benefit of joint ventures was that a joint venture could step above and beyond the competition, because it would allow you to combine with another small business or an other than small business that is mentor protege approved, right? And to be able to go after opportunities through the strength of the two that you couldn't otherwise. And how did you do that? Historically, joint ventures, I said probably as late to my recollection, as early as around 2012, if not earlier than that, they were able to benefit from utilizing past performance of either parent. Okay. There's sort of a historical discussion about how that evolved. But now both the JV's past performance can be submitted under regulation. And in addition to that, the past performance of either respective parent can also be submitted. So that could mean that one side may not have as much past performance or any past performance and relies primarily on the other side. As a protest lawyer, have I seen issues with that? I would suggest that that both parties have some relevant experience. Certainly.
Yeah, I can only imagine that's an entirely different conversation. But I do
Yeah.
see, and because we're going to talk about benefits in a second, but that's definitely a huge benefit because even like when they allowed subs to start using their experience, it allowed a whole different realm of opportunities for companies that I think initially didn't think, well, I don't have anything to submit. So that's great because I didn't know that. But you were talking a couple minutes ago about, like 60% of the work
Yeah.
being available for small businesses or, other companies to be able to work underneath of the joint venture. So can you
Mhm.
talk a little bit more about some of the benefits as to why would I want to get into something like this and what would be the benefit for me?
Okay, certainly. Like I said before, I've given many presentations on how joint ventures help you win more with more. We've just talked about how past performance, companies with no past performance or limited past performance can benefit by using a joint venture and the part and where the agency is actually required under SBA regulation to consider the past performance of their JV partner. Also, under certain circumstances, the systems and certifications of that joint venture partner as well. When it comes to security clearances, I generally don't speak about that publicly without actually having a close look at it. The SBA has regulations on it, but I believe in February of 2023, was it 2024? Or maybe a little bit earlier than that. Within the last 8 months or so, SBA in combination with NIST actually issued additional guidance that sort of builds upon the security clearance requirements for joint ventures. And so, general, if anyone has a separate question about that, they're welcome to ask me offline because I don't believe that separate guidance has been formalized into a final rule. So. I
Mhm.
also would tell you that I think the value propositions are that there's going to be more work, there's going to be more profit, there's going to be more control. Folks have very likely seen, um, if I can mention a program to use it as an example, the NASA Soup JV, right? It shows a sense of customer commitment. Agencies are also, particularly when you're looking at mentor and protege joint ventures, they're going to say there's not one arm here, there's four or more, right? So when I'm awarding, and this is something we'll talk about momentarily because it's actually become an issue of concern for the SBA. When I'm awarding under a multiple award IDIQ contract, significant contract opportunities in terms of expectations, requirements, and dollar value to a small business. And then am I going to choose, a 10-person company, a 20-person company, a 50-person company, or am I going to choose a conglomerate of a joint venture where there's two companies that under the SBA regulations, even if one falls, the other has guaranteed to the SBA, certified to the SBA, that it will step in and do all of the work of the JV, which is particularly important from the standpoint of project risk mitigation, because if it's a mentor protege joint venture with a particularly large company involved, right, then if I were in awarding activity, I would probably take a very close look when awarding serious requirements to the company that I could expect might meet the requirements, a JV, particularly a larger mentor protege joint venture, but also where I'm guaranteed that if one falls, the other must stand. Okay, or others must stand within that JV. And I hate to say it, but as July 22nd, and I think this is something that's important for small businesses to know. If someone has a question about this, they want to participate in the SBA comments. The SBA actually issued a proposed rule requesting comments on the fact that there's somewhat of a concern, as they state in quotations, that joint ventures are winning an inordinate amount of awards. Mentor protege joint ventures are winning an inordinate amount of awards. And so they've kind of set forth some things that might opinionatively set back the progression and the development and the understanding of joint ventures. I won't take a harsh position here. I will be submitting comments. I will be posting a blog on LinkedIn on it to encourage understanding with small businesses, to encourage them to participate, because there is a level playing field, right? This is if you're saying asking me what the benefits are, I'm saying look at the SBA request for comments. They're saying that two joint ventures are winning, and men approach joint ventures are winning enough that we may curtail some of their eligibility for certain requirements. I think that that's the proof in the pudding that if you're
Mm,
not considering joint ventures, that you might want to consider joint ventures. When I say a benefit from a work, profit, and control standpoint, you're getting more work than a prime sub relationship. And it was historically just keeping it simple. A lot of folks still call it this, and it's not correct. The 50% of the work rule is the limitation on subcontracting clause. But as I just told you, even if it's 50% amount of the gross amount paid by the government, right, that must go to the small business prime. This also applies to JVs. It gets a little convoluted for this discussion. In a joint venture, your partner can do as much as 60% of the work and
mm,
take 60% of the profit, right?
wow.
And it actually allows more control for a mentor, perhaps on the minority side, or a small business on the minority side, even though the qualifying member, the 51% holder, the 8A firm, must control that company, right? There are some things to think about, like a dual bank account. If it's a marriage with children, you can't sign a check. There's a problem. It's a requirement. If but at the same time, at the prime sub level, if I'm a large company and I'm subbing to a small, I can't. My contract, if I wrote it, is not gonna allow me to speak to that end user, the customer, the government customer. Here, I'm a part of the prime solution, and I can speak to the customer openly. You also
What
look
would
at things. I just want two more points. I'm so sorry.
okay.
Another benefit is going to be mentor protege joint ventures. You're going to look at increased assistance in affiliation exceptions. Okay. This is I talk too much because I'm a lawyer and I get paid for talking, but the issue is that there's just so many benefits with joint ventures. It can be such a strategy discussion. And when you're looking at mentor protege joint ventures, it allows increased management, financial, and technical assistance. Lastly, and most importantly, despite recent case law regarding one of the socioeconomic programs, I believe that there's an extreme level playing field when it comes to joint ventures. That means that regardless of whether you are total small, regardless of whether you are SDB, anyone, if they've engaged in the appropriate relationship, can be a hub zone company through a joint venture. Anyone, if it's a large company, mentor protege, anyone can be an AA, underscoring that earlier point. Anyone can be a woman owned small business. Anyone company can be an SDVO or hub zone. So it's important to learn about joint ventures because often the challenge for small businesses is that they have to educate their partner in order to um, for their partner to understand. There's such a lack of understanding among the industry, and so I do have a course on it. I give away the slides and recorded content for free, and you can reach out to me for that. But it's probably very important for you to study joint ventures because often you're going to have to help the agency during market research understand what they are, and you're also going to have to help your potential partners. I call it tea parties. I'm happy to talk to anyone on a tea party or a client if they invite folks to help up or educate their partners and their lawyers about the benefits. Mrs. Gainford, I'm a talkative lawyer, aren't I? But I just
Hey, it's
love joint
okay. It's
ventures.
great. No,
I love
it's
joint.
good.
I've seen if you ask about the benefits, I mean, many of my clients for several years, I have been like joint venture, joint venture, joint venture, joint venture. And some of them adopt it, 4 or 5 years later. And when they do, looking back, some of those companies, that is their primary contract activity. So I just
Mhm.
love it.
No, and I get that. And it's great that you're offering the education and the information for, companies that either maybe don't know like where to find it or they don't have access to it. So it's great. And I mean, if you know the show, I'm all about providing that type of
If they get
information
to
to
know me through my law firm every single month, I provide we have a good number of followers. I should be posting more on LinkedIn. Every single month, I talk about joint ventures and on a webinar. So they're welcome to follow me and hear more in depth. Yeah.
what would you advise for small businesses, especially to consider before they enter into a joint venture? Because
Well,
like
I
you said,
mean,
it's a
yes.
marriage. So like
Yeah.
what do you need to consider before you get married?
Well, first thing is understand joint ventures and make sure your partner understands them, right? I mean, it's kind of like have we read the book on what to expect when you're expecting when it comes to having a child, right? You first of all understand them. Second of all, understand that an operating agreement, so a lot of folks think it's sufficient to have a template that's provided by the SBA, but that template meets the SBA's requirements. That template does not talk about the operations of community partner. And I believe it's important to consider having both a JVA and an operating agreement. I personally consolidate mine. I tell folks that if you've paid, I regularly meet them, if you've paid 15,000 or more for an agreement as a challenge, I'm not going to market on this show, but I have a commoditized price under 5,000 for my JVAs across each category, substantially under. So I consider it to be a lost leader, and we do bigger businesses, our client companies grow. But if you're paying 15 or I even heard recently 30,000, I mean, that's not, I hope that this message can be sent because that's not reasonable for a small business.
Mhm.
And these lawyers have the documents around it. You're never going to invite me back, are you? But with that
No. Oh
said,
my goodness.
you know, uh, the other thing is, and this is the most central thing. So recently, I am from Alexandria. I lived in DC, and my practice is based out of Rockville. I live in Virginia Beach, 8 blocks from the beach. Love it here. After several years in Florida, and I recently did a program with some of the largest consultancies in the Hampton Roads area, and that had not only subject matter experts on joint ventures, but also some leading small business executives, and one is approaching or is already mid-size, and they talked about joint ventures. All right, and it wasn't just the SMEs, including me, saying if you're entering into a marriage with children, do your due diligence. I underscored the point that your due diligence should involve checking references on the owners and the company and their subcontractors. And when they give you the ones that they want you to talk to, asking for ones, finding out on your own networking, federal databases, who else might have been a subcontractor, and asking for that information as well. Due diligence. I mean, if you're jumping to a marriage with children, and companies will do it in business, there is risk. It's up to the executive of each organization to assume that risk. I simply would advise you date first. That was the
Mm.
consistent message of the event that evening to other executives in the room, from whether it was SMEs or it was executive to executive on the experience portion of that program. They were saying, one even said publicly, we even dated for 3 years, meaning prime sub, reverse, one
Mhm.
prime, one sub, that sort of thing. But when we got into the mentor protege joint venture, it was when money was involved in that marriage with children that we began to have some challenges.
Mm.
Um, yeah, in addition to that, so I think the most critical piece of advice is do your due diligence, date first. And if you're going to engage in a met at the networking event, I won't say bar, met at the networking event, fly by night marriage with children joint venture, the risks must outweigh, I mean, the benefits must substantially outweigh the risks involved. It
Mhm.
can tank your entire company. It can lead to negative morale among your staff. So going after those high, I'd say if agencies publish their acquisition plans, significantly far in advance before opportunities even hit the street anymore. And so it would be, I'd say, educate yourself on JVs now so that you're ahead of the game, even for unexpected requirements, but planned requirements especially, and that you can begin, engaging your partners. I'd say, what would I advise joint venture agency advise small businesses? Two more points. One is that the DoD Mentor Protege program just had its sort of annual meeting in Detroit about 2 or 3 weeks back. I have published a blog on my LinkedIn, so I regularly microblog of need to know information for not just my firm, but of other subject matter experts and other some federal agency notices and that sort of thing, just to help promote knowledge and understanding in the community. But my argument in a recent blog on the DoD Mentor Protege program is that they're looking to increase participation. That means to me, I won't go into it publicly on Mrs. Game First, but I do on LinkedIn. That
Mhm.
means to me that it's not simply going to be increasing participation, but that means that there's also going to be a lot of emphasis on DoD's Mentor Protege program participants receiving awards as well, because those are credible metrics that can be reported up within the agency. So what I say is while your competition is focused on the SBA's mentor protege program, I say you should be too. But the DoD is focused on its mentor protege program, and I think you should be as well. Lastly, when it comes to the 8As when it comes to 8A companies, keeping in mind that any company can be an 8A through a joint venture, their slice of this opportunity may be slightly lower. I would say that for 8A companies, the SBA regularly, makes statements that most 8A companies don't win their first joint venture. I mean, they don't win their first 8A contract until year 4 or 5 of the 8A program. A 9-year program that could be very critical to your business objectives, and impactful to not win within that time period. And I talk about on my webinar, I talk about on my microblogging on LinkedIn, what I call the 8A low hanging fruit strategy. And I'll just state it in a nutshell. Your 8A entrance strategy should solve the exiting 8A's dilemma. And I won't go into that in too much detail, but you should plan your strategy based on the fact that customers like that 8A that has to leave at year 9, they still probably want that 8A.
Mhm.
And if you are able to establish relationships with that 8A, it may result in you getting awards now from the 8A firm that's leaving so that they can have a joint venture child with you when they leave and seek to pursue um, opportunities with customers they've introduced you to and that still want them.
No, that's a really good point. And you shouldn't say anymore so that people want to hear more about it, and then they can reach out to you about it separately. So make sure to, I'm going to link his information in the show notes. So, go ask him about it. But I ask all of my guests the same two questions. And
Yes,
so
ma'am.
my first question is, in addition to all of the advice you've already given, if there was any
It's
advice
not
that you would
advice, it's
give,
just a presentation.
well, if
But
you
you're
were
right,
to
it is.
give
I will say it's advice for you, man. Yes, no.
if you were to give advice to
Yes.
someone already in like
Yeah.
the small business government contracting industry, or someone that's looking to get into the small business government contracting industry, what would you say to them?
Someone that's looking to get into the small business government
Yeah.
contracting industry.
Yeah.
Um, I would say that, first of all, attach yourself to a lawyer as a guide. I talk to hundreds of businesses in a month through my law firm, meaning owners, through my law firm and through GovSeries and Pending Trade Association. I speak to a lot of early stage companies, advanced companies, what have you. And I think that the first thing that you should do is attach yourself to a lawyer who's governed by state laws. I'm not saying myself. I'm saying that someone that you can trust, that when they're talking to you, if they're selling you in a certain direction or they're making a referral within their network, that they have accountability. Because that's one thing. The next thing is my dad is from back country to back country. He's a doctor in North Carolina, and he's very adamant that before we work on my '64 Chevrolet Nova, that I had to master the engine, and that meant read a lot of books. And so I generally will inform companies that you need to do your own homework. I also don't make recommendations about books, but I provide a list because I get so many requests each month of books that back in like 2008, 9, that I went to Amazon and I Googled, and I say, when you're doing your research, do it like this lawyer. And I think a lot of other lawyers do it. Read 15 to 30 books so that you can manage the consultants that are going to be, you're going to meet around the Beltway, who are helping you do business with the federal government, who are helping you understand government federal contracting, helping you get your GSA schedule so that no, if you're 8A, don't sign up for 8A today. Wait, you know, it will help you manage those things. And so after you've done your homework, I would say you'd be empowered to, understand the kind of the framework. I'd say be involved in the PTAC in your state or the Apex Accelerator in your state to get one-on-one counseling as you're learning along the way. I would
Mhm.
also say get to know your SBA representative in the local district office. get an understanding of all of the different variety from woman-owned small business to veteran-owned small business divisions that they have that can help you in addition to lawyers and consultants along the way. And I would say go hard. Um, What I mean by go hard is I cannot tell you that I'm honored to have worked with companies. Just talking to one yesterday, one representative from one yesterday, who I met in incubators, who now are on the road to billions. And I'm not
Mhm.
going to say that that's everyone. There's some companies, some clients who have switched to different industries. But go hard. Get to know the lay of the land, and don't be afraid to explore joint ventures. I would tell you two more things, Mrs. Gankford, and that is, in the first instance, it is explore joint ventures because your competition may not be learning them, especially if they're moving from commercial to federal, no matter how big they are. They certainly give you a leg up. That's why the SBA is looking closely at how much of a leg up they give you. I would say I talk to a million, like not a million, hundreds of companies in a month, right? And the challenge with those companies is I often ask them brain stumper questions. Who are your teammates? Who's your mentor?
Mm.
Who's your protege? Not just who's your mentor, but who's your protege, depending on their level of experience in the industry. You can be both.
Mhm.
In the SBA's program, it has to be approved, right? If a mentor protege relationship is going to provide increased management, financial, and technical assistance, and essentially an affiliation exception, because the SBA can't necessarily hire hundreds of millions more people to provide the same experience based benefit. They can, but will they? To industries, I mean, to industry. And so, historically, whether it was previously evaluation credits, to now more of a focus on affiliation exceptions. Understand that your mentor can take a 40% interest in you, which can be a capitalization benefit. It can be an exit strategy. If your exit strategy begins on the day you start your business, um, it is critical. And so, if I were to be invited back, although I've talked a million minutes, I'd be interested in, or if I were talking to companies, I say generally, 6 months from now, when I ask you, who's your mentor and have you protéged, I'd hope to have an answer. We more than that, we're just exploring that, but we've taken these credible actions towards doing that. In addition to that, I also say this is a part of the think big concept, right? What do the big companies do? I talked to a representative from a large company years ago. They had 30 prospective proteges in a protege program department. I regularly tell folks, and this is in closing, I regularly tell my clients, small business companies, that you should have 2 to 3 small business partners across each category, depending on your size and experience. They want you to bring them the opportunity if they're bigger and you're trying to get on their level. Okay. Large company, mid-size, small. It's generally your goal, your job to bring a relationship to the table, a contract to the table, a contract opportunity to the table. You can't just go to them and say, I'd like to do business with you. They want you to bring some opportunity and something to talk about. Secondarily, I'd say across each labor category, because you never know where your relationships will expand as people move between agencies, among several other things, as program requirements change from one set aside to another. And so if you're in a position where opportunities should be fielded to you, then thinking big really means that, much like some of the nation's largest government contractors who have a vast network of contractors coming to them, or that they incubate technically from across each socioeconomic category, by diversifying your networks, by coming to GovSeries Teams Unite, an executive
Mhm.
teaming event,
Mhm.
you're able to consistently refresh your networks. People get stale, and so do the revenues, right? It's great that you have 1 or 2 relationships that work for you, right? But your partner is probably the one that's going to get to mid-size. Is probably regularly refreshing their network, and as a result of that, they're going to have more opportunity in front of them.
No, it's really great advice, and I'm sure my listeners are going to have more questions for you. So if they want to get in touch with you, what would be the best way to do that?
I mean, I'm a small business myself, and I do have a website with some of that contact information. My law firm is Deal Services, but I'm looking to I'm an avid microblogger. I'm posting a lot more on LinkedIn. I'm looking to increase engagement with the community. So LinkedIn, and that's Jerry Miles at LinkedIn, is a great inroads to getting to know me. I'm not necessarily, I can't say I'm a lion, but I am a lion. I'm happy to talk to anybody on LinkedIn. So if they were to add me on LinkedIn, I'll generally accept it. And that way, I'd also say following Deal Services. We'll eventually start posting more stuff because we've had a lot of followers in the last couple of months. So we'll probably post more things on Deal Services LinkedIn page. But Gov Series is really a focal point for me right now. It's GovSeries. Following Gov Series, coming to Gov Series events is a great way to meet me in person as well, from Hampton Roads to Tyson's to Columbia, Maryland. Hopefully, a few years from now, California, but back home to Florida.
Well, I will make sure to link all of Jerry's information. And if you have any questions about anything we've talked about today, or if there's anything that I haven't covered on the show that you want to hear about, please shoot me an email at breakingthestandard@gmail.com. Make sure to go check us out on Apple and Spotify and now on YouTube. And until next time, bye.